Welcome to the 30/30 Health Podcast. The following discussion is for education and entertainment. It is not intended to diagnose or treat disease. Please do not apply any of this information without first discussing it with your doctor. Here is your host, Dr. Ruiz.
Hello everyone, my guest today is Darryl Edwards. Darryl makes his second guest appearance on the show to talk to us about his new book, Animal Moves. As the founder of the PRIMAL Play methodology, Darryl Edwards makes activity fun, effective, and engaging while getting individuals healthier, fitter, and stronger in the process. He specializes in working with people from ages 4 to 94, fitness for those who hate exercise, as well as for those who love it but relish a new challenge. To celebrate his interview, we are giving away his latest book. For instructions on how to win this challenge, just go to my Instagram, 3030strong, and click on the link on my bio. The contest is simple. Just upload a picture of you or your kids doing your very own animal move. You can walk like a crab or hop like a bunny. Let's get creative. I hope you enjoy the show. Hello everyone, super excited about my guest today. This is Darryl Edwards, second time on the show. Darryl, how are you, man?
I'm pretty good. It's a sunny day in London. So I'm making the most of it. I have been making the most of it. Really great weather at the moment. And it's always great to talk to you, Guillermo. So pleasure as always to be on your show.
It's funny. Last time we talked, it was during the winter, and it was around 26 or 27 degrees, perfect weather. It was, Arizona was beautiful. What's the weather over there right now?
Are you talking Fahrenheit or Celsius?
Well, we can do Celsius. We can do Celsius.
So Celsius, it's been about 27 to 29 degrees.
I'm at 41.
So, yeah, I can't even imagine.
So we flip, man. Now you have nice weather, and I have the horrible weather.
Yeah, I can't imagine that kind of heat. But I tell you what, I've experienced within the last couple of weeks. I was in Cairo, so I was in Africa. I was in the US, the Caribbean, and now back in London. So I managed to experience like some real extremes of heat and humidity, some thunderstorms, and also some really pleasant weather.
And you know what they say, that dry heat is more tolerable. Once it gets into like 45, 46, it doesn't matter. Hot is hot, man. So Darryl, last time we talked about Paleo A to Z. What have you been up to lately?
Yeah, so I've launched my new book called Animal Moves. And the reason for that book was because I created an online program called the Animal Moves Challenge. And the concept of the philosophy behind that was a way to get humans moving in the way that we were designed to move. So nature has given us a way to move, which is a movement generalist rather than a movement specialist. So exercise and fitness tends to be fairly one or two-dimensional. We tend to select what we're really good at or what we really enjoy. So if I'm a runner, or if I feel like that I'm a runner, that's what I'll pursue. If I like endurance events, that's what I'll pursue. I'll maybe become a triathlete. If I love strength training, I'll start doing some Olympic lifting and getting myself in the gym, and I may neglect other aspects of movement. I may not want to do any stretching. I may not want to do any cardio work because all I want to do is get strong. But humans are adaptable, and that the reason for the adaptations that we have in terms of movement is the fact that we can perform all these different movement patterns. We can run, we can jump, we can climb, we can crawl, we can lift, we can carry. But we don't engage in those movement patterns in the 21st century because we don't necessarily have to, right? Ancestors would have to move in this way in order to survive. They became great at being average across all movement patterns. So when we compare ourselves to animals, the rest of the animal kingdom, I can't sprint very fast. A cheetah can outsprint me, by 3-4-fold, right? An ant can lift 100 times their body weight. Dolphins can swim far better than I can. Monkeys can climb far better than humans can. Kangaroos can jump, much further than we can. Even fleas can jump, 100 times their size, significant distances, in comparison to their size. Humans are pretty poor. We're jack of all trades and master of none. So by mimicking the animal kingdom, by taking on board all those movement patterns that we can observe in nature, we'll become more human. So by training like an animal, it allows us to be flexible in terms of the movement patterns that we engage in, and we'll actually become more adept at being more human when it comes to movement.
Because like, for example, if you are in the, in the plains, and you're trying to hunt deer, there are tribes that, maybe they couldn't run as fast as deer, but they had enough endurance that they would
Yes.
just chase the deer forever until it collapsed.
Yes, so persistence hunting is definitely one method used by some tribes, but it's one, it's one method of hunting. And even if you're persistence hunting, you still have to engage in lots of other movement patterns as well. So there's going to be some time walking.
Or you have to climb a tree. Yeah, it's fantastic. Go ahead. Sorry for interrupting you.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, you're elaborating on my point there, but basically, they wouldn't only rely on one movement pattern alone in order to be successful in their hunt. So, they'd be tracking the animal, they'd be crawling, they'd have to probably sprint after the run to ensure that they definitely catch the animal once the animal's fatigued. They then have to kill the animal, prepare the animal, carry the animal back to their original location. So they're probably not going to run back when they're carrying something very heavy, right? They're probably going to be walking back for most of their the return journey. So I think even in that example, which is a graphic example of one method being used for called persistence hunting, for those who prize endurance, and they train for that. Their rites of passages are based on endurance hunting and based on endurance. Sorry, they live in environments that are very high elevation. So there's a lot about the reasons why they pursue a particular method, because it suits their environment really well. But you go to, say, the plains of Africa, and you say, look at the Hausan, for example, Namibian tribe, and they don't hunt using persistence hunting, right? So they spent most of the time walking, tracking, crawling. They'll climb trees to get some elevation to kind of scout the area. They'll spend some time sprinting. They'll use tools to be able to hopefully kill the animal, and then have to take the animal back great distances back to feed the rest of their tribe. So I think just from a hunting and gathering perspective, there's a lot of movement patterns that we would engage in. Some very slow, steady state type movement patterns, right through to very powerful, explosive movement patterns. And then that's just getting food. What about protecting? What about building shelter? What about recreational movement patterns that we would engage in, like dancing, like reproduction? There are so many movement patterns that we have to undertake just as part of our survival. Squatting, giving birth. The positions that we get into now aren't necessarily ones that got us here.
And that's what's amazing, because you're right. These fads come in and out of the 70s distance running, and then 80s more like aerobic class exercises, and then in the 90s all the rage was and maybe in the early 2000s was sitting in front of your TV, putting videos in and doing things for 90 days, and then CrossFit, and then and CrossFit got a couple of things right. You do train for the unknown and the unknowable. What do you think CrossFit is missing?
To be honest, CrossFit was one of my gateways into this lifestyle. So I watched a training video for the movie 300.
Yeah.
Back in the early 2000s. So I watched a training video whilst they were still making the film. And I saw these guys training, and I was like, what the heck is this? And it was a guy called Mark Twight who used to be number 2 to Greg Glassman, who was the founder of CrossFit. And this elite athlete, who Mark Twight was, he was an alpine climber and racer. He basically joined up with Glassman and was like, okay, I want to learn some of your methods to expand his repertoire of what fitness was. So much more general preparedness. And I was like, this just sounds fantastic. The director of the movie, I remember 300, said that he wanted you to believe that these actors could actually go to battle, which meant that their training had to be very functional. It wasn't just about aesthetics, even though their aesthetics improved by undergoing this training regimen by Mark Twight.
And to touch on the aesthetics, it was a very different type of aesthetic. They stopped looking like a Ken doll, and they were looking more like a He-Man doll. Like they were like thick and defined, but strong and powerful.
Yeah, for sure. So they didn't want just kind of a bodybuilder look. They wanted you to be. You can see that they were quite ripped and shredded and quite lean. Some of them were quite scrawny, because they wanted you to believe that these guys were going out to battle, and they wanted their movements to be very functional. So they didn't want these guys just to look great, but to move as if they were moving in slow motion. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
They were like clumsy or weren't able to have really full range of motion, and weren't able to perform some of these that amazing choreography in that film, that fighting choreography. So I jumped on the opportunity to learn how to train in that way. I found out about this term called functional fitness, which I hadn't come across before. And so what I would say CrossFit does extremely well, and did for the fitness movement as a whole, is really get people, your average Joe and Jane, thinking about functional fitness and saying that your movement should be able to prepare you for life, not just for the gym,
Not just for a photo shoot.
and just for a photo shoot. Just look good on in a bikini or on the beach. So where I would say we could go even further than that is by paying homage to our hunter-gatherer ancestry. The real reasons why we were built to move in a particular way was our interaction with our environment. That's where the adaptation came. So we didn't evolve in a gym environment. We didn't evolve by doing HIIT training and Olympic lifting and 100 burpees for time. That's not what got us into shape, right? What got us into shape was our ability to navigate the environment, to be able to build shelter, to hunt and gather food, to be able to do the things that would help us to survive, right? So those are the movement patterns that we should be modeling today, which is a far wider scope than just the movement patterns that are covered even within CrossFit.
It's more than just a push and pull and exercises.
Yeah, exactly. There are so many movement patterns that we have to engage in. And so, if you want sexy movements, then you could argue getting rings, doing some Olympic lifting, doing high intensity interval training. It's very, very cool. It's very of the moment. It's built for those who look great with their t-shirt off in the gym. Do you know what I mean? It caters for a certain type of individual who wants that go aspect of fitness, the sport of fitness as it's termed. Forging elite fitness is another term that they use. But there's a lot of people outside of that world who can't get a look in. There are more people who spectate and watch the CrossFit Games than who participate in it. Similar to the Olympics, right?
It kind of sucks that CrossFit went the elite way, because it did have some of this, unknown and unknowable movement components to it, and a lot of people could benefit from it, and I'm not just talking about elite athletes. I'm talking about grandmas, I'm talking about moms, I'm talking about kids. But the bias now is to be rich fronting.
Yeah. I mean, and of course, it was designed to be scalable, so that you could have anyone taking part. But I feel that there's still a barrier to entry.
Yeah.
So the barrier is it possible for me to do? Can I join that gym? Can I feel comfortable with my peer group within that gym? Do I feel comfortable utilizing that equipment? So yes, for somebody who makes a decision to attend a session, to have a really good CrossFit coach, you could be a grandma, right? With limited mobility, he would still be able to perform a lot of those movements scaled down and scaled appropriately. But there's still something, if you don't ask the question about exercise, which is exercise is only here because there's a lack of physical activity in the modern day life. So exercise, fitness in terms of the conventional fitness is a proxy, it's a substitute for the lack of physical activity that we used to get, for the amount of physical activity that we used to get in the past, right? So our ancestors didn't go to the gym. They didn't train by lifting heavy weights. They trained by actually doing what they had to do every day, right? It's like saying to a farmer, you know what, you have to lift bales of hay all day, but get you lifting weights first before you begin, right? No, you just have to. It's just what you have to do, right? You just have to do the work, and then by doing that work, you get into condition to do that, to continue to do that work. So I think the questions around even things about perfect form. I mean, really, like, can you imagine if you observed a hunter-gatherer tribe and saw them lifting? I guarantee you they would deviate from what we term to be perfect form in many, many ways. So we have to create these very structured ways to move, because we believe if we deviate from that, we're going to get injured. That if we're not 100% efficient at moving a particular way, that's detrimental to us. But we are not machines. We're not robots. We weren't programmed to operate in a particular way. We have an inordinate amount of flexibility for our musculoskeletal system to be able to adapt to movement, even if it isn't amazingly efficient. And that's why we are generalists of movement, right? There are limitations. There are limitations to what our bodies can do, because evolution has given us general preparedness over being extremely efficient at anything apart from walking.
And even that we mess up by the use of shoes and heels.
Yeah.
But perfect example. How many people have you overheard or you've heard people say, I don't do squats because I don't want to mess up my knees?
Yes.
And then, but if you look at a baby, innately the baby squats when lifting something. It's like we're pre-programmed to have this movement pattern, and then somehow we get into our heads that doing a squat is bad for our knees.
Yes, for sure, because a kid will squat instinctively, right? They'll see an object on the floor, they'll walk or crawl over to it, they will squat down, they will half lunge in order to get access to the object, and they'll have really, really good form oftentimes. But even with kids squatting, I suppose the point I'm trying to make is they won't always have perfect form. They may have some slight asymmetry. They may be just thinking, they may be playing in that position, which means they may not have a completely neutral spine. But it's not an issue because they move so much and have such a wide repertoire of movement patterns at their disposal. It's not an issue for them. For us, when we have limited range of movement and limited movement patterns that we engage in, if we do deviate from what we term to be perfect form, there are consequences for that, right? But if you have somebody who's always been squatting, you go to Southeast Asia and see people squatting for several hours having a conversation, right? Again, they won't all have perfect form, but there's nothing detrimental about how they're squatting because that's what they've always done, right?
Yeah, we can geek out and talk about like, oh, the toes should be pointing at this angle or straight forward, and the head should be, in line with your spine. Whatever. If you want to machine the ability of lifting something, maybe taking away those inappropriate postures to increase your momentum like a machine, yeah, maybe that's okay. But in reality, is life all about being the strongest or about being the most resilient? Now, Mark Ripito on Starting Strength opens the book with an argument about how the most important thing in life is strength. And that's why you should be this machine that lifts heavy things. And the way that that intro reads, it reads like, okay, strength is more important than love, and strength is more important than everything. Like literally, he says strength is the most important thing in life. If you agree with that, maybe becoming a squatting machine might be good for you. But if you are in the majority of people that think that there are other things that are more important than strength, then maybe you need to read Animal Moves.
Yeah, well, you know what I would say? I kind of agree. I kind of agree with Mark, but at the same time, it depends what your definition of strength is. So if your definition of strength is your ability to apply your maximal production of force against an object, say, in a short space of time, a maximal effort, whatever your one sentence description of strength is, then it limits us. It limits human beings because there are many ways to demonstrate physical strength, which isn't just how heavy something is when you lift it, right? So I would say if you expand that definition to cover all types of strength that we can, actions that we can engage in, then I would 100% agree with him. If his definition is very refined down to, okay, how heavy is what's your 1 rep max in your deadlift? What's your back squat? How much can you bench press? If that's what he's referring to, which I would argue he is,
Yeah, I know he is.
then I would say it's self-limiting once again, because if we were on a desert island, for example, right? There's a few of us on a desert island, and we were like, you know what? Let's pick the ideal individuals to live on this, to enable us to survive, right? Just based on our physical capability. You would want a serious amount of all-rounders on that beach. That's all I'm going to say. You'd want those who are strong, great endurance, great flexibility, can do lots of different stuff. That's what you would want. And over time, once you actually feel that things are kind of okay and stable, then you can start focusing on, okay, what are your unique talents that we can really exploit, right?
Like storytelling.
Like storytelling, like you being the best person at creating tools, like you being the best person to scout. Do you know what I mean?
Not just physical advantages.
Yeah, not just physical advantages. But at the beginning,
yep.
For survival, you'd be like, yeah, we need all of these traits, right? Pointless being strong, just being really, really strong. If we need to walk a few miles to get access to food and we get out of breath, we can't even get there because we're so deconditioned in terms of stamina endurance. We can't even walk a few miles. But yeah, we can lift heavy logs out of the way if we have to. You know what I mean? You know what I mean?
And not to bash on Mark, because the purpose of his book is to make you stronger, and it's a great book for that purpose.
Yes, for sure. And I would say that I want to be very strong, very mobile, great endurance, great access to lots of different movement patterns, great ability to crawl, to jump, to climb, to run, to sprint. I want all of those abilities. And if I have to sacrifice the best of one particular trait to be average at them all, I would rather be average at them all, because I'm less likely to get injured. I'm less likely because of repetitive stress. I'm less likely to overtrain in a particular area, which means there's going to be less chronic stress to my body. There's going to be kind of, by default, I'm going to be recovering by doing something else, which would again mimic what nature has provided to us in terms of our capability. So I'm not knocking anyone who wants to get really, really strong or to get really, really fast. But you could argue that some of the strongest, fittest individuals aren't necessarily the healthiest, right?
Correct. Like, you look at the Olympic athletes. They have a shorter lifespan than normal people because they are so specialized and they are pushing the limits of physiology. So that puts you at a risk for dying early.
There's always a cost in whatever you do, right? There's a cost-benefit analysis. So I would argue that if you're training just for performance, nothing wrong with that. But if you're training just for elite fitness, there may be a cost, which is your health and well-being. There may be a cost, which means you can't dedicate your time to other pursuits in life because, if I'm an athlete, I've got to train several hours a day. There's not much else I can do outside of that. So if I'm training that way, plus I have a full-time demanding job, plus I want to have a social life, maybe I'm going to sacrifice my sleep, right? Maybe I'm not going to have enough downtime and relaxation time and stress, management time, because I haven't got time for that. I've just got to work, 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 work. So yeah, I'm trying to consider the average person who needs to give themselves an excuse not to be sedentary, because most of the population are sedentary. Most of the population are not don't have gym memberships. That's the reality. You know, most people who sign up to CrossFit, who have a membership, are not continuing to go to their CrossFit gyms 6 months, 12 months after signing up. That's the reality. It takes a certain type of individual who can maintain a movement practice, who can maintain an exercise practice. And if you take away the motivation of real life, I don't have to get up in the morning and move to survive, most of us are going to say no. I'd rather get up and stay on my sofa and watch Netflix all day.
Totally.
If I, you know what I mean? If I could do that and there were no consequences in me doing so, I'd probably do that and have somebody feeding me grapes, living that kind of Wall-E existence. If I could live like that and there was no negative consequences, I probably would.
In reality, the consequence that we face is that, okay, so I don't have to go to the gym, and the only thing I need is to take this pill, maybe to reduce my diabetes, maybe to reduce my blood pressure, maybe. The problem is that those are not solutions. Those are just Band-Aids. In your epic presentation at PaleoFX, and you talk about the risks of not moving and their direct connection to cancer incidence, it's not even like, oh, instead of I can take a pill. It's like, no, you need to do this so you don't have to take that pill.
Yes, exactly. So, I mean, I believe movement is medicine, exercise is medicine. And there are certain benefits that come from movement that cannot be replaced by any other intervention. So we know that diet, has a remarkable impact on our health or increased risk of disease, chronic lifestyle disease. We know that, right? But we also know, the evidence also suggests that if we're sedentary, it also increases the risk of chronic lifestyle disease. And even if you're eating a perfect diet, but you're sedentary, you still are at risk of chronic lifestyle disease, right? So the best thing you can do is to improve your nutrition, improve the amount and the type of physical activity that you're getting, to look at your other aspects of your lifestyle, like your sleep quality, like your levels of stress. Acute is arguably fine, but chronically so not so good for us. So there's so many factors when it comes to good health and well-being, and usually I think movement is the one that's kind of overlooked. It's looked at well for getting into shape, aesthetics, for performance, for demonstrating your fitness level. But when it comes to actually good health, all people tend to say is, oh yeah, it's good for your health. But they don't really know why. They don't understand the underlying mechanisms. They don't talk about the biochemistry in the same way that they do if we're talking about, improving your gut flora, right? Or maintaining glucose homeostasis. We can talk about it all day if we're talking about, the impact on carbohydrate consumption, say, if that was your hypothesis, right? We could talk about insulin, we could talk about glucagon, we could talk about the other gut hormones in relation to appetite, and so on. But movement tends to be overlooked when it does have an impact on pretty much all of those things.
Well, you know what, Darryl? I hope we don't start looking at it, because what happens is if we start researching all of the things that movement and exercise do to your body, that's when the pharmaceutical company starts looking for pills that will replace that.
It's already happening. I mean, there's already research. There's a hormone called irisin.
Yeah.
Which is known as the exercise hormone, which I talk about a lot. There are already companies who are trying to extract a synthetic irisin, and because of its cancer fighting properties, because of its ability to its fat reducing properties, the metabolism increasing properties of that hormone. that purely comes from muscle contraction. So muscle contraction activates this hormone. So in other words, if you're sedentary, your levels of this hormone are reduced. If you exercise, if you're active, there's elevated levels of this in your bloodstream. So you get all the health benefits. So, we know that anytime, whether it's a plant, whether it's good food, whether it's any health intervention that you can think of that comes from nature, science will always try to
replicate it,
to harness that and replicate it, right? And and that can happen in the conventional way in Western medicine, but it also happens in complementary medicine, right?
you were right,
You know,
and you were 100% right about that. Yeah, and that's not true healing.
and that's right. That's not true healing at all. And what we should be focusing on, which is very difficult for us to do, admittedly, is to go back to basics and recognize if we really want to get on board with preventative health and disease prevention, I should say. I don't know why it's called preventative health actually, because we're trying to prevent disease, not prevent health, right? So I'm not sure why that moniker is being used, but if we want to prevent disease and want to prevent disease that we know has a genesis based on living a lifestyle which contributes to that, then that's what we need to be talking more about. And it's really difficult because when you tell people how easy some of this is to do, we want to overly complicate it, right? We want to spend more time studying it. We want to prove that we're knowledgeable about the subject. The amount of people that are probably reading about improving your sleep hygiene at 1 o'clock in the morning. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or reading about the most amazing workout to do at their desk, thumbing through a men's health magazine rather than actually being in the gym or going outside and actually doing it, right? Or looking at a cooking show.
Yeah. Scanning. I was gonna say scanning Instagram for the next recipe.
Yeah. So probably in the 15 or so years that I've been living this lifestyle and trying to improve my health, or improve my health, I should say, from my starting point, I've probably gone full circle. And now I'm always trying to find simpler ways of communicating this to my audience, as making sure there's an evidence base, and also making sure that I can make it as easy as possible for me to make this lifestyle sustainable and maintainable, and not feel as if I have to be a monk and not feel as if that I have to be perfect and live perfectly. Because if you start doing that, then you can remove one of the most important aspects of life, which is enjoyment, is a joy of living. So yeah, I'd rather be a little bit more relaxed about my lifestyle choices rather than kind of worrying and becoming neurotic about it.
So let me ask you, how did you research Animal Moves?
I suppose it's based on my time working with my clients and seeing what's been really effective and what I've been influenced by and inspired by. So that includes everything from, parkour, from early 70s Kung Fu. So I was a big Kung Fu fan back in the 70s, early Jackie Chan, Shaolin style. I went to Beijing, several years ago to study Shaolin actually. And they use a lot of animal forms, monkey style, snake style of Kung Fu, praying mantis. For thousands of years, they've become aware that by mimicking animals, that you move better. You actually improve your movement capability. And so they've taken to the next level by saying we'll compete based on specializing in a particular animal form. Whereas I'm thinking more about how can I maintain really good strength, flexibility, mobility, stamina, endurance, balance, coordination by mimicking different animals. So I'm trying to, again, bring it back to basics, almost being childlike. Pretend to be a bear. Let's crawl like a bear. Let's walk like a duck. Let's jump like a kangaroo. Let's embody these animals, not because we want to, look amazing. It probably looks quite funny most of the time, but because our body really responds well to these type of movements. There's lots of neurogenesis because we're almost improvising as we go. Our bodies there's lots of left-right brain communication. by moving in this way. So when you become uncomfortable with particular movement patterns, when you're challenging your coordination, when your brain and your body become one based on the movements you're engaging in, that's when you receive the most benefit. So these contralateral quadrupedal movement patterns that occur, say, in crawling, have remarkable benefits in terms of lighting up the brain, in terms of creating new brain neurons, which is neurogenesis, of elevating levels of BDNF, which is brain-derived neurotrophic factor, like fertilizer for the brain. So there were so many things that come from that concept that I do talk about in the book, but the most important thing is to do it,
Yeah.
right?
and it's funny you mention all these concepts and you mention all these ideas where we usually fall, or where with these concepts or these hypotheses, is that they look great on paper, they make sense of on paper, and whatever, we can geek out about neogenesis and all of this other stuff. But it's actually fun to do your classes. It's actually fun to do those patterns, and you can see it because every time we go present at a conference, your sessions are always full. And people enjoy it, and it's not just the 300 crew. It's moms, and it's kids, and it's adults, and it's all these different people from different backgrounds, from different physical activity levels, doing your protocols and having fun and laughing and smiling, and it's sustainable, and it's cool, and people are gonna do it.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's one of the things that are missing, frankly, with a lot of fitness programs. So most people are already catered for with fitness programs. Those who want to just push themselves, those who want no pain, no gain. There are plenty of those programs out there. And on the other end of the extreme, you've got the programs that are so lightweight in the sense that let's hardly do anything at all, but you're going to feel really great doing it. And I want to be somewhere in the middle, whereby I'm saying, okay, we want to enjoy ourselves, we want to have fun, but we do want to be challenging ourselves. We do actually want to have a training effect. We do want to have an overloading effect, which means I am getting stronger, I am getting faster, I am improving my balance skills and my ability to coordinate myself. Do you know what I mean? So there needs to be a way of blending both objectives. So one is, let's punish ourselves, let's be punitive, let's make it a chore, let's make it something that you do once you've got everything else out of the way. And let's be really disciplined and self-motivated. The other end is, let's just have fun, let's roll around in the grass and laugh and joke all the time. And there's this middle ground of serious play, which is what, again, children engage in oftentimes. They're not always smiling when they play. Sometimes they're really serious. They're visualizing being chased by lions, or they'll pretend that they're their superhero and I can fly like Superman, you know what I mean? So they'll if you look at their faces, there's no fun visibly necessarily, but they're still engaging in that kind of playful spirit. And so as adults, we've lost our connections with our inner child, our abilities to play seriously, ability to recognize the benefits of being more playful. So I try to infuse that in my sessions and recognize that we all need more joy, even with all the adversity that we face, that, we're all facing different bits and pieces. Life isn't always fun, but if you can take a moment or two to have some fun, to recognize there are far more things more important based on the now than what you're worrying about that could happen tomorrow or next week or next year, right? So being in the moment is important, having fun is important, and moving as we were designed to move is also really important.
And you see it, the physical diversity of the people in your different classes it's amazing. It's amazing, and it's not really a problem. But is this scalable? You are yourself. You're putting out books. How can we get more people to mimic what you're doing and to help more people and expand this movement so more people can have access to it?
Well, I've recently launched a certification program.
Oh, really?
Kind of a coaching program, yeah. So I've spent several years kind of developing the concept, proving the concept, going out all over the world and making sure that it works with all types of populations. So very young, very old, so from 4 to 94, all levels of kind of mobility. So those in wheelchairs with walking sticks right through to elite athletes, those who are suffering from, chronic lifestyle disease. So it's really painful to move. Can they also take part? So I wanted to be able to road test that. And once I felt satisfied that I could do so, I started to think about how can I scale this? So I now have a training program, a coaching program, and that's where it's really gonna take off. This is a real test, I suppose, is getting people to take this out to their communities, to get those that they influence on board with this, and make this movement a global movement. So I'm really excited about launching that, and the first Primal Play movement coaches will be on the scene very, very soon.
What does the program look like? How long is it? What kind of things are you teaching? Are there basic concepts or ideas that you teach?
Yeah, so the first level is a level 1 certification. So this is the kind of the prerequisite for some of the other specialist certs that will come. But it's going to give you some anatomy and physiology. So teaching you how we move and the body mechanics and why it's important to move, and some of that underlying kind of physiology, which is important in relation to movement, what we should be doing and why we should be doing it. Right through to discussing play theory. So there's a heck of a lot of research on the benefits of play, not just for kids, but for adults as well. So why I'm using the play theory and play theory science to work with primal play. And then there's the coaching aspects. So how do you coach individuals? How do you coach groups? How you can identify learning styles so you can get the most from your clients and your groups, and how you can make sure that they can maintain some of that practice once they're outside of your influence, right? So you don't just want to, have a group session and people go, okay, that was great, and you want people to go, oh my goodness, this is going to make a difference to my life. I want to talk to others about this. I want to play with my kids more. I've learned some great moves with my coach, but I want to take this home and do this with my partner and the kids. And, when I'm having a picnic with my friends, let's play some of those games. So I think there's an opportunity to really kind of spark interest in enjoying movement again. So, yeah, so it's pretty arduous, the coaching program. There's an offline component. There's an in-person workshop. There was an examination, like an assessment of you being able to coach, as well as being able to perform some of the movement patterns. But at the same time, I want to make this accessible for people. So this isn't marketed just at personal trainers and physical therapists. This is marketed at anyone who wants to teach some of what I do and take that to their communities, take that to their clinical practice. So I've got doctors in the first cert. I had doctors. I had personal trainers, I had, yoga teachers, I had primary teachers, I had health coaches. So that gives you an idea of the makeup of those attending, which is pretty fascinating. So initially, I probably would have imagined it just to be personal trainers who wanted a bit of an edge, right? Oh, we're doing some really different movements. But actually, it was a really varied audience, very young to a lot older. Fairly even male-female split. It was great to have that dynamic, and hopefully the audience that they're going to be, communicating to with Primal Play are going to be just as diverse and just as varied.
Especially because it comes to mind, one of the conversations during one of the panels at AHS last year, and how within the paleo community, within the minorities are kind of underrepresented. It might be expensive to be paleo. It's expensive to join a CrossFit gym. I talk about how we need to eat better and how we need to do this or do that, and then I think about all the systems that I've made to make myself successful. For example, If I want to eat, at a cheaper cost for me, I buy in bulk. So I'll go to my Costco and I'll buy a bunch of, Kerrygold butter. If they have organic veggies, I buy pounds of veggies. And then I come back home and I open my freezer and I store my food. Okay, so that involves having a car. That involves having a Costco membership. That involves having a refrigerator and a freezer. And sometimes when we're just starting in this health journey, it is just easier and cheaper to go to your fast food restaurant and buy a combo than because that's just like a tiny amount of your paycheck in comparison to the systems that you have to build in order to be able to save money. It costs money to save money. And unfortunately, minorities, we are at this disadvantage for XY reason.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a tough one. I came from a very impoverished background, and I did very well for myself. So I was fortunate enough to go to a very, very good school. I went to what's known as a grammar school, so I was quite a gifted child. I was able to work in technology. I worked for Microsoft back in the 90s. I then was headhunted to work in investment banking, where I had a very lucrative career. And so, because of that background, I've never forgotten what it was like not to have, there were times when I didn't have money, when my parents didn't have money, where it was difficult to get food into the house. And my mother, did really well on a limited budget to cook really wholesome foods. But there's a point in time where it's now become cheaper not to buy wholesome foods, right? So she would do everything she could to budget. She wouldn't go to supermarkets. She'd go to butchers, then she'd go to greengrocers, then she'd shop around. She'd walk for miles. We'd carry the shopping with her because she didn't drive. So there were, but times have changed significantly from my childhood. The pressures are different, and convenience is paramount. So you're just bombarded with very easily produced, nutrition depleted foods, high energy, low nutrient density foods, easily accessible. It's just so difficult to avoid that environment. There are certain environments where you live where there's no whole foods. There's not even a place that sells whole food, like, fresh food. The only options are highly processed, refined foods. So what do you do if you're in that environment and you're working 2 or 3 jobs and you come home late at night and the only thing you have is a fast food restaurant open, right? Where you can buy something, a full meal for a couple of dollars. So I think sometimes we need to step back, and just because we feel it's really easy to live this lifestyle, because we have systems in place, because we can access blogs and read all the information and listen to podcasts, because we have time to do so, many of us, that there's a whole raft of people who don't have access to this information, don't have time to access it, don't understand the language that we use, are put off by some of the messaging, who feel alienated, that it's elitist. And if we really want to help people get on board with this message, we have to think of alternative ways of doing so. So we shouldn't just be satisfied that we have however many million people around the world are doing paleo, living an ancestral lifestyle, have reaped all the health benefits. What about the other several billion who would also benefit from this lifestyle, who would also live healthier, longer lives by doing so, who would also, ensure that we're not suffering with chronic lifestyle disease prematurely or at all. So I'm really passionate about that. And I think I'm not saying that I have any solutions, but I do believe we need to be doing more to disseminate this information. And I'm not sure what the best channels are of doing it, but looking at the paleo community, and I've been involved in this community for several years, in terms of professionally, you're seeing the same type of individuals coming, year after year. The diversity of the audience hasn't changed that much since I first started. And we've got to start asking why that is. What's the reason? And it isn't just purely economical, right? Because we have, there is representation of ethnic minorities in all areas of life. So it isn't just about economics. Yeah, I've been to other seminars where, I've been to, medical conferences, and there'll be lots of people represented in that audience, but there isn't a similar makeup in, say, the ancestral health community, right? So there's a disconnect somewhere, and we've got to ask ourselves why that is. How can we attract more people to this?
And there's so many barriers, like for example, me having a Mexican background, language is a barrier. There's socioeconomical barriers because, I do put out a free podcast. You're listening to it, and I put out all this information, and then people that are using government assistance, they might get side-eyed, or they might get some shade because they have an iPhone. Well, how the hell are they going to listen to podcasts?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
how
yeah.
are they going to have, so what? They should use a flip phone and just know that eating this way, it's the way. So we're getting it from every side.
We know once you've been touched by this lifestyle, you're aware of how powerful it is. There is so much of this which doesn't need huge sums of money. We can all make better decisions which have nothing to do with income, but it's people realizing that's possible, which is the issue. That's the problem. When I was last in the US, I remember the hotel I was staying in. I asked them, "Oh, where can I go and get some food?" Early evening. Where's a local restaurant? Where's a local grocery store that I can get some food? And they said, "Oh, the nearest grocery store is 15, 20 minutes away by car." So I was like, "Oh my goodness, right? I'm gonna have to get an Uber." I was like, I wanted to walk. I was like, I just want to walk and get, And it was like, "No, you can't walk. It's 20 minutes away by car." But where I was staying, there were probably 20, 30 fast food places within a couple of minutes walk. So most people would decide, not most people, but some people would decide, you know what? I'm just going to go next door and get a whatever from next door. And when you walk past these places, the bargains that they have, you're just thinking, how can they produce this food this cheap? Like bargain buckets with like 30 pieces of chicken for $5.99, and I mean, it was just like ludicrous.
In fact, they incorporate into their ads. It's cheaper to buy this meal than to cook your own meal, and in some cases, it is.
In some cases, it is. For sure.
If you don't have the ingredients at the house, and you have to buy, maybe it's fried chicken, and you gotta buy some buttermilk, and you gotta buy chickens, and you gotta buy oil, and that meal, if you were to prepare it paleo fried chicken, it would cost you $60-$70, and you can get that for $10.99.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's a time and convenience factor into that as well. So yeah, some of these, I suppose some of this topic is way above our pay grade, i.e., it's societal issues, it's cultural issues, it's not things that can be solved by the paleo community. But in terms of us disseminating this information out there, we just need to consider, are there other ways, are there other vehicles that we can be using to reach more people? Because the biggest drain, unfortunately, on societies, the lowest life expectancies, I know we discussed elite athletes, but the lowest life expectancy tends to be in the developed world, tends to be those who are the poorest in that society, right? I was reading, I think a couple of days ago, there's something like a 25-year difference in life expectancy between the poorest communities in the US and those who are the most well-to-do, right? So that isn't just about eating too many carbohydrates, right? Or too many refined foods. There's more to it than just what you're eating. Is my point. That creates a 25-year discrepancy, and we have something similar in the UK, where you go from West London to East London, and I remember seeing an infographic once. So if you go along the metro stations or the tube as we call it, the underground, from west, which is basically lots of money in the west, not so much in the east, very poor communities in the east. Literally life expectancy, some of the highest in the country in West London, some of the lowest in the country in East London. So again, remarkable disparity between the two. So,
And it's an uncomfortable subject, but let's make let's make it a challenge for all those entrepreneurs in the libertarian side of things. We don't see a lot of minorities at these conferences. Guess what? That's an open market. Let's exploit that market and make money. So it's either we help for altruistic reasons, or we help for maybe that's an entrepreneurial spot for someone to make a difference and maybe bring people and more people and grow the movement. And we are talking about like monetary repercussions, but in reality, we're helping people, we're expanding in the movement, we're changing markets, and we're making things better. And whether you are motivated by money or motivated by helping people, everyone wins.
yeah, there obviously has to be a way of, I haven't been able to bankroll what I do for free, right? I need to work. I need to get paid for what I do, and so there has to be this blend between, okay, I need to make money to support what I'm doing, to be able to help people. I need to help people so I can support what I do, and support myself. So I don't have any conflict with that. But at the same time, there are people unnecessarily suffering. We just need to think. We just need to think about that. We can't save everyone.
There are people that don't want to be educated.
Yes, of course there are. There has to be a time where people have to be given the opportunity to decide what they want to do with their lives, right? But if we have an opportunity to communicate with them, if we're given that opportunity, then we've got to think of the best way of doing that. That's the point. We may not always have that opportunity, but if we do have the opportunity to interface with those who also need this message, how can we best do that, which will suit that audience as well as our personal aims and objectives. So yeah, no easy solution, but I think the more people like ourselves, like others in the community who are discussing this, who are thinking about expanding this movement, it's gonna happen. It's an organic movement. It started off very small, probably a handful of people. Look how many people are in this industry now. Look how many vendors there are. Look at the size of conferences now, like Paleo FX. I mean, they're huge conferences. The first one I went to, probably a couple of hundred people there. Now there were several thousand attending. So yeah. So things do change. Hopefully, it's not gonna plateau. Hopefully, it's not gonna stay fringe. Hopefully, we can have an impact which is greater than ourselves. And we kind of know that's already happening, right? We know there are more restaurants serving grass-fed beef than there were 10 years ago. It probably wouldn't even been a discussion 10 years ago for many people. There were more places catering to the market. Whole Foods didn't have a paleo section 10 years ago. Paleo was not referenced at all. Even 5 years ago, paleo wasn't getting much of a look in.
Last night I went to see the Solo movie, and in the menu they had gluten-free cauliflower pizza at a movie theater. Okay, so look at the advances that we've made. So if anyone's listening, and you feel really strongly about this movement and you want to make a dent, my challenge is let's take it out and let's get more representation from different groups, LGBT, Latino, African American, people of color. Let's get out there, and just kick ass, because when we bring all this diversity, the only thing that's going to happen is it's going to expand our knowledge.
Yes, no, for sure.
Originally, when I started paleo, it was a very low carbohydrate type of diet, because that type of diet, is beneficial for people that are not from the equator, that happen to be have less melanin than me. So it was biased. So all these people with a low carb diet were getting some great results. So I'm a person with ancestry from Mexico, and I was put into this box of maybe doing a more lower carbohydrate diet, and my lipids started suffering, and I was losing weight. I felt better. I was getting healthier, but it wasn't perfect. So if we start bringing people from more different backgrounds, maybe we'll discover things that we're not talking about now.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but there's a whole, I'm sure we want to be able to be doing this indefinitely, right?
Yeah.
This is our lifestyle. So, and we want to bring other people on board, and the diversity that I speak of, it's not just color or race or culture. It's age. It's gender. Sometimes we can see, that there's an overrepresentation in different and underrepresentation in different areas, but society's makeup is diverse, right? So the paleo community should be too, and not just those who are the consumers, but also those who are driving the agenda and who are discussing this, who have a viewpoint which may differ from others in how best to work with particular communities. So I think this is gonna, I think this will continue, and that's something that I feel very positive about. That having this discussion even is positivity in itself.
I know it's uncomfortable, but we gotta flex those muscles too, and we gotta be open about this because I don't want this conversation just to stay in the back rooms or in the green rooms of conferences. I want people to know what people like you are thinking, and how we can expand and help as many people as possible, because that's the point, and that's why we're doing this.
Yeah, for sure.
So Darryl, where can people get you? Where can people, sign up for the cert so we can exponentially grow this movement? When is your next presentation? And what are you up to? And all that stuff short of your digits.
Okay. So I'm pretty excited to be involved in speaking at the British Society of Lifestyle Medicine in a couple of weeks. And then I'll be speaking at AHS in Ancestral Health Symposium in July on one of my favorite topics. So I'll be talking about something called movement oncology. So the benefits of physical activity for prevention and treatment of cancer. And in terms of certification program, so the best place to find me is on my website, primalplay.com. And there you can find out what I'm doing, what I'm getting up to, all the areas of research that I've looked into in relation to the benefits of play and movement and physical activity. You'll also find out where you can get my books from. So they're from all good bookstores as well as all bad bookstores. You can get the books. And fortunately, Google has been very, very kind to me by meanings that if you search for Darryl Edwards, Darryl Edwards on Google, I'm pretty much on everything you see on the first page, so you can find out all about me there. If you're into social media, just to finish, then you can find me at Fitness Explorer on Twitter and Instagram, and Fitness Explorer you can find me on YouTube and pretty much any other social media platform that's out there.
Well, Darryl, it's been a pleasure. Always fun to hang out with you. Always fun to go dancing with you at all these conferences. Always fun to share a meal. And I can't wait to see you in July, because I'll be at the Ancestral Health Symposium presenting too. It's like we pick up exactly where we left off.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. I look forward to listening to your presentation. Always interesting and full of interesting facts. So I'm looking forward to that. And yes, thanks so much for your time. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you.